Hey Capricorn, and welcome to your semi-biweekly reading for the new to full moon. So this is from May 19th to June 3rd. I'm doing something a little different with these videos. I have some astrology highlights that I want to go over for you guys for this last part of May, going into the first 3 days of June. So you can go ahead and check that out now. I also have timestamps down below though, if you want to just skip right on ahead to your tarot reading, especially if you're watching more than one of these readings for your sun and rising sign. So with that, let's go ahead and get into it. Okay, so the first chart that I want us to take a look at here is on May 16th. And this is where we're going to see Jupiter ingress into Taurus. It's also going to come right up next to the North Node here. And immediately once it enters, it's going to square over to Pluto. So let's break this all down and explain this, right? So we have Jupiter, which is this beautiful kind of growth and expansion. It can bring in a lot of opportunity. Some people talk about it with regard to luck, and it moves into a place that has to do with the world of the material, right? The world of the tangible. So this could be something that feels really supportive in terms of growth, and it could feel, like we feel this in a very physical way in our physical world, or maybe even emotionally, but this could feel really refreshing, right? One of the things that I want to point out here, though, is that it is coming up next to the North Node, and the North Node has this energy of we could say excessive energy, like a lot of energy in one area. And just like it is with growth in any area of our life, growth can be beautiful and amazing, but when it goes into a state of excess, it can become toxic, right? It can become too much. So we have this, there's two sides to every coin with everything, with astrology, with tarot, with everything, right? So there's the light side and the possibilities, and there's also the possible shadow aspects. When it comes to us talking about just this energy of Jupiter being in Taurus, we can feel that slow, steady, reliable kind of energy, that Taurian, sensorial pleasures kind of being magnified and being the volume being turned up on this, right? So that can be really refreshing and beautiful kind of growth. However, if we're looking at the excess that could possibly come in, one shadow way that could show up is, let's say, for instance, you look and see where Taurus is in your natal chart and it occupies the 12th house. Well, the 12th house, amongst other things, can have to do with addictions, right? That's one of the areas and things that it could deal with. So let's say that with things that are pleasurable, right? Like whether that be substances or food or something else, right? That there is some kind of addictive quality to because it feels so good. It could turn into really diving into that, really expanding that to the degree where it's it doesn't stop us going into that direction, and it could feel like escapism, right? We could just kind of run away into that. That's just one example of how that could look. This is why you want to see where Taurus occupies your chart. However, the North Node can also be something that feels like it really gives us drive, right? It gives us a lot of energy behind this kind of growth. So this is just something that's going to be with us for the next year until May 2024. So I thought it was worth bringing up. And you'll see how this actually starts to play into things building up with the transits that I really wanted to mention for this second part of May. So the next chart that I want to point out is on May 19th. And this is when we're going to have that new moon in Taurus. So this is a lovely new moon. I'm really digging the energy here. So think new moon, fresh energy, right? And then we have that Jupiter, which just freshly ingressed into Taurus. So we also have that refreshing kind of new energy for growth that's coming into this same sign of Taurus, right? And remember what I said about Taurus, right? Taurus is that stable energy. It's the pleasurable aspects of our material and tangible experiences, think good food, good libations, good, all the yummy things, right? So we have all of this energy coming together, and it's also where the moon likes to be. The moon is exalted in Taurus. So it's just really lovely energy. And as we'll see going forward, I'm going to talk about some, speed bumps that we're going to see after
after this along the way. However, despite the fact that we're building into this T-square that I'm about to talk about, this has a lot of lovely like elements that could make for some really beautiful new beginnings. So this would be a time with this waxing energy. Remember, new to full moon is waxing energy. To plant those seeds. The seeds that you plant during this time are going to ripple effect, not just from here to the full moon and build in that and culminate in that way, right? But it's also for like several months out, like about 6 months out. So essentially, you want to just be really mindful of what you're doing with the energy on this day. Like, this is one of those ones where I'm like, hey, take advantage of it. You know, whatever it is that you do this day, it's like whatever you don't want to be doing more of over the next like 6 months, like, then I wouldn't, if possible, I wouldn't be putting your time, energy, and attention into that. I would really spend some of your time, energy, and attention into doing the things that you would like to see grow, the things that you would like to be doing more of with your time, energy, and attention, right? So, and this is going to be exact at 8:52 a.m. It says Mountain Standard Time because that's where I happen to be right now, but you know, think that's Pacific time as well. So just adjust for your time zone with that. So now we come to the chart that I've been kind of building towards, which is on May 20th. So we're going to talk about a T-square that's happening between Mars, Pluto, and Jupiter. But first I want to kind of start off with just talking about that we're going to have Mars ingress into Leo, right? And that's going to be there from May 20th until July 9th. So just know that the energy of this particular transit's going to be continuing on, like for at least for Mars and Leo. So what's that like, right? So Mars and Leo can kind of bring in this burst of energy, right? Like, think about the drive and the fieriness of Mars, and think also about, you know, it being in a fire sign like Leo, right? Especially Leo, which is ruled by the sun, right? So this could bring a lot of energy, and we can really utilize that in a constructive or very productive way, depending on where this is in your chart. So whenever I'm talking about these things, like, you want to go take a look at where Leo is in your chart, like what house it occupies, so you get a sense of like where you might have this like excess, or not excess, but like abundance of energy that could be utilized. One of the things that I want to mention here when it comes to Mars is that, like, when Mars, think about when you have like too much energy in your body, right? A really good example of this is, like, let's say sexual frustration, which is appropriate for Mars. So let's say that you have a ton of energy, just like sexual frustration, just nowhere to put it, right? Like nowhere to put this energy, no outlet for it. And you can feel like kind of irritated or frustrated, or kind of like get a little snarky with people, or, you know, like just feeling that kind of sense of irritation. And so, like, sexual frustration aside, like just thinking about when you have an excess of energy and no outlet to put it in, we can feel like that kind of irritation, which can come out in ways that are, you know, creating conflict with other people. So you really want to kind of pay attention to that as well. You know, it'll depend on what you've got going on in your chart, but I thought it was at least worth mentioning. So it could be really productive, could be irritating depending on. So I would say, you know, find constructive ways. Like if you notice, like, whichever area in your chart this is happening, that you're starting to feel like a little, you know, more irritated or whatever it is, then let that be your signal to utilize Mars's energy in a constructive way, because that's what Mars wants. Mars wants an outlet for that energy to be utilized. It doesn't want it to just sit there and be stagnant, right? So now let's take a look at what is happening with this T-square. So we have Mars, and it is opposing Pluto, and they are both going to be squaring with Jupiter, right? So let's first start by talking about Mars opposing Pluto right here. So when Mars is opposing Pluto, we can see things that come out, like the themes that can come out like around power. You know, when you're thinking of Pluto, we can think about power dynamics, and we think about Mars and like the energy that I was just talking about that. So feel into that and you can get a sense of like how there can be these like kind of conflicts with power. So power struggles, power dynamics can really come to the surface. And, you know, the thing about this is like, it can come out in these really shadowy ways, right? We're talking about an opposition here, and oppositions are not an easy transit, right? You think about these two planets are going toe to toe. And so when they're going toe to toe like this, some of the more challenging aspects of of their abilities, their, you know, what their properties are, can really come together in that way, right? So like, and just like this, I don't want to demonize these planets, like, but, you know, every planet has shadow and light, like constructive or not constructive parts. And in this particular aspect, we're seeing like it could be really challenging because it's a challenging aspect, right? So, and then we can take a look at what is happening with Mars that is squaring over to Jupiter here. And so that can be like, well, on the one hand, when we think about just these two energies in and of themselves, not in a hard aspect, it's like a lot of energy, right? Think about Jupiter in its expansive energy, like this magnifying energy, right? It's like it's big, it's really huge energy, right? And then you think about adding Mars with all of its fieriness and its drive and everything to that as well. So this, you know, in a really constructive way, could be like a lot of power, that and enthusiasm, right? That could be used to really take action in a way that's like maybe risk taking, right? So like think about Mars, like can be about that risk taking. So this can be really beautiful in that way. But when it's in a square like this, we have to kind of really watch how that comes out. Maybe being overly optimistic about the risks that we're taking or the actions that we're taking, you know, that are kind of bold, and wanting to kind of maybe just double check, like check in with yourself about that, really make sure that you're sure about this, especially on this particular day. This energy is going to be building, but it's also going to last, like kind of just last for a few days after this, especially. So, you know, we want to be aware of these things. You know, there are a couple of astrologers that I follow that I thought had some really great things to say about this. And like one of the astrologers that I follow was talking about how like this energy between Pluto, or between Mars and Jupiter, can feel like this, you know, ruthless pursuit of our goals. And I thought that was really well said, right? So, and the way that I feel into that is kind of like bulldozing others in the process. So, you know, be aware of like others, others' needs as well as your own, and maybe check yourself with that, you know, and just remembering like some of the things that I'm talking about are going to be echoed over here with the square that is happening between Jupiter and Pluto, because Pluto is a higher octave of Mars, right? So just think of like how that is like similar, but just, you know, add in some of the aspects of Pluto that have to do with, you know, possible manipulation, that can do with like secrecy, or that can have to do with like shadowy, kind of darker, harsher, like intense things, right? And so but very similar in like the energy, right? That, you know, you can hear probably the similarities in that. So I don't want to spend too much time on that. So, you know, this T square could possibly instigate within others or ourselves, like this, you know, like maybe burst of energy that goes into like us making rash decisions, rash choices. And again, with that manipulation that comes through with like the Pluto being there. So, you know, with all of that, we want to, I think, just make sure, again, like check our own motives, check ourselves in our decision making on this day, on what we're trusting with our, like whatever opportunities we're wanting to grow, how we're choosing to grow that. I think it's worth reflecting on, like pausing and reflecting would be, I think, worth it on this day. Like if it slows down your process, I think it's worth it to slow down your process just to do your best in this particular scenario, right? I also can't help but think about, like, you hear all of the elements I'm talking about, and like, you know, with Pluto being an outer planet, I feel like this brings in like more of that collective energy, and I can't help but think about, war and conflict on that level and how that might affect things. If there's anything that I can really say, it's that, Jupiter does have benefic qualities, although it's diminished when it's being aspected in this hard way. I mean, you can kind of see it's like the pressures being put over on, like, from two sides. It's like it's getting it from a couple of sides, right? But it does still have benefic qualities, and if anything, I think I'm hopeful that Jupiter's benefic qualities can come out and maybe soften some of the edges of this hard aspect, at least a little bit. Jupiter is also known for being like this mediating kind of influence. And so I'm kind of hoping that that brings that some of that energy in here. One other thing I wanted to mention is that, this is happening all in fixed signs here. So these are all fixed signs. And one of the astrologers that I follow, also like a different one, said something that really struck me, and I was like, oh yeah, that makes so much sense. It's like obvious. How did I not see that first? But when things are happening like this kind of aspect is happening, it's touching all of these fixed signs. The fixed signs have this quality to them that are very like certain, right? And so the decisions that we make, the choices that we make, the actions that we take, the paths that we choose are like, there's a more definitive quality to it. Maybe even a more like a longer lasting, like the either consequences or the ripple effect from these decisions, better said, maybe like could really echo out, on the timeline, on our timeline in the future. So this is another reason that I wanted to mention that, is like there is a definitive quality. So be mindful, really be mindful. Like I really wanted to highlight this and spend a lot of time on this, because like this is something where I'm like, hey, let's be mindful of which paths we choose, what choices we're making, the actions that we take. So like before you do that thing, before you say that thing, check yourself and, ask yourself, like, is this something that's worth having the ripple effect go forward out in my timeline into the future, right? So, okay. So really quickly, I just thought I would mention, yes, we are going to have the sun moving into a new sign. So obviously, you probably haven't noticed that I've been talking about everything from a tropical perspective. So I'll have to do sidereal videos some other time. I'm kind of figuring this all out, but I wanted to mention that, yes, we are having the sun ingress into Gemini. So for those of you who follow tropical astrology, happy birthday, Gemini. I just wanted to mention, yes, we do have that happening on May 21st. Okay, second to last chart that we're looking at is May 24th. So on May 24th, we have the moon ingressing into Leo, and it's like, I'm going to come join the party with this whole T-square business going on, right? Mars is already starting to move off. We see it's at 2 degrees. It's starting to move off. It's not quite out of this, but so we can still feel the energy of it there being a part of this T-square that we just talked about. But when we have the moon coming in and joining, whatever themes we were experiencing during that T-square that we felt or saw come up, this is kind of like coming in and touching on that again. But this time in an emotional sense, right? We might feel this more. So we might kind of be processing this internally. We might be feeling this more emotionally. So just to say, like, it might kind of pop its head back up around this time, and I just wanted to mention it really quickly so that you're aware of that. But yes, this could add an emotional quality to this. So again, all of the things that I said about watching ourselves with this, again, still through this time, like all the way through till this time, but still through this time, and just notice that maybe you feel like your emotions are a little bit on high with this. You might notice that, you have maybe like you might want to watch your emotional reactions to things, just noticing. So I think with astrology, it's just, this isn't to scare people. It's just to say, hey, let me give you a heads up so that you can just be more mindful about certain themes that particular day and how you go about choosing or making choices, or like, what you say. Because if we can avoid maybe some of the harsher parts when we go through it unconsciously, why not, right? Okay, so last chart that I want to take a look at here is on May 27th. So we have a new T-square that we're going to check out. We're already starting to kind of like feel a little bit of that energy from the T-square I was just talking about between Jupiter, Pluto, and Mars starting to kind of like push off. Not totally out of it, but like we'll feel that pushing off. But we're going to talk about a new T-square. So this one is between the moon, the sun, and Saturn. So we have that opposing moon and Saturn, and then those are going to be squaring the sun here, right? So let's kind of break this down a little bit, right? This could be a little bit of a reality check for everything that we've kind of been putting forth up to this point in the month, right? The things that we're growing towards. Remember when I was talking about this new moon and it being a really great time to plant seeds, I was like, yeah, we might run into things that feel a little bit like speed bumps along the way. And so this is one of those points that I was talking about. You know, when we have moon in a sign like Virgo is ruled by Mercury, and it is definitely very attentive to details, right? So we have like this quality of being able to pay attention to like the details. And then we also have that coming with Saturn. Saturn also has this ability to really focus in on the details and be more pragmatic about things as well. You know, like very kind of maybe more angular in terms of energy, right? So this could be really good, right? This could be like a way of maybe reframing how this could feel challenging, is to see that it is just showing us, it's illuminating the things in our life that need tweaking with regard to like our goals, ourselves, you know, whatever it is, right? So because like how we might experience this is that we can see all of the flaws, right? Like that's the thing about, you know, the energy of, you know, this Virgo, you know, energy with the moon and its opposition with Saturn, right? Is that it could feel scrutinizing. It can feel like it puts a damper on things because we are seeing the finer details of things. We're seeing maybe the flaws where like those things feel like there is a magnifying glass on them and we can see like every little speck of dust, right? And so with that, you know, we might feel disheartened or discouraged in some way by the things that are being shown to us because it feels uncomfortable. Again, when we're talking about, you know, opposition like that, it can feel uncomfortable in these ways, right? So this is a chance for us to reframe it though, like the, you know, the signal for us when we start to see on this day those things that are being shown to us, we can start to just say like, okay, I knew that today might be a day where I'm seeing kind of like all of the little flaws and things in my project or in myself or in whatever it is, right? And so, you know, this is, let me just make note of it. These are things that need my time, energy, and attention to be worked on, to be tweaked, right? Let me just go in and like, clearly there's an issue here. So whatever issues are showing up, they're being shown so that I can tweak them, right? So that I can make things like easier and better and like of better quality, right? That's the thing also about Virgo, wants that quality. And, you know, I think Saturn does too. Saturn wants things that are like structured, that will stand the test of time in a way. And so I think that it's trying to show us these things so that we can make adjustments to really build something that is of quality that will stand the test of time, right? So, and like, I think the key here is to see how we can, you know, constructively utilize this energy, not be so hard on ourselves or so disappointed to the degree that it actually affects our will right here with the sun, right? That it dampens our will to move things forward because the sun can have to do with that, right? Like our will. And so, you know, and we see that they're kind of like, I like to think of this like an arrow when I see T squares like this. It's like the pressure's being put on from both sides to the sun. And so we might feel challenged in that way with our forward movement, with our will to keep going with things and to move things forward. So, you know, just wanted to point this out so that we can utilize the astrology as like a signal, like like, oh, I'm seeing how I was expecting that on this day, like some themes that were going to be shown to me that were maybe harsher, or the fine details were going to show up. So cool, let me use this instead of being disheartened by it. It's being shown to me so that I can actually create something of quality and that is a lasting structure going forward.
All right, Cancer. This is for Cancer, Sun, or Rising sign. And this is for that waxing phase of the moon. I'm feeling this card here. It's for that, wow, interesting moon. It's for that waxing phase of the moon. Which deck do I want to use for my Cancer, or sorry, for my Capricorns? I'm torn. I'm going to go with this deck. So we're taking, these are short and sweet readings, right? We're just getting a little bit of guidance for this approximate 2-week period of time in this waxing moon energy. So how was the end of your eclipse season, Capricorn? How did that go for you? Where are things at for you now? So we are at this point where we can now return to our regularly scheduled new moon programs, right? So if you are someone who typically sets intentions, plants your seeds, does like some kind of ceremonial ritual or something of that nature, then this is an especially helpful time to plant those seeds, right? Like we're out of the chaotic energies of the eclipse season. And so we're out of the Mercury retrograde. So now like here we're back to having like more of that energy that's waxing and like building energy available to us. So this being in Taurus in both the new moon at least being in Taurus in both tropical and sidereal, I feel like this is just like some lovely energy coming through. Obviously, there are other aspects that I talked about in the astrology portion, but like, you know, it is a really lovely energy, Taurus and the new moon and it being waxing after everything that we just kind of came through. I feel like this is some nice energy. So let's take a look at where your energy is being directed. So we're kind of just taking a look at like what, you know, you can call it your guides, you know, angels, whoever, universe is highlighting and directing and kind of like pointing your attention to. So it's the world of your emotions, right? This is the emotional world. It's also a psychic world. We're looking at the moon. And interesting because like this isn't my monthly reading, this is actually a moon reading and it's for the new moon to the full moon. It almost looks like a new moon is happening here, right? It's like, I mean, you can see the crescent, but you know what I mean, right? So we have the phases of the moon. I think that's just really cool synchronicity that comes through. So this is also about, like it says perception, and in a way I can see the moon being about perception, but I feel like this is more like perceiving our internal landscape, right? Like feeling into and perceiving our internal emotional landscape and our intuitive psychic hits, like what we experience in that world. This is a very private world, right? The world of the moon has to do, like the moon is related to our body, more specifically to our stomach, and for those of you who have breasts, to your breasts. But it does, like the moon does represent our body. And so, you know, this can also be, I think, on a level of self-care and looking at like where your self-care is in terms of your body. But more than anything with the moon, it's just such a private place. It's such a softer and more sensitive place. And so I feel like your energy is kind of asking you to tune in to those inner landscape areas, to your emotions, to your intuition, to what would feel nourishing for that, like what would feel nurturing and nourishing for your emotions, and to cultivate your intuitive, you know, senses, right? And maybe during this period of time, like growing that, paying attention to that, maybe putting attention on that if you don't typically, right? Like Capricorns, depending on like how it's set up in your chart, like if you have really strong Capricorn or Saturn placements that like would relate to some of the like the typical associations with Capricorn is like just like the working the grind, right? And like being like regimented, having like these rules or structures that you work within, and like really going for it, right? And like wanting to master things and really committing to something and really going and like doing, right? And so this could be really bringing your attention to like, hey, do that, sure. And also remember to pay attention to like how you are growing your internal landscape, how you are dealing with that in terms of like personal growth, and how you're working with nurturing and nourishing and caring for your internal landscape as well. So that's what I see coming through for paying attention to for my Capricorns here. And like the other thing with the spiritual advice that you're getting is the Six of Swords, right? And so I really like this, especially how like coming out of the eclipse season, you know, it's like the energy of this card is very much like going towards, you know, your new path, like allowing people that need to be you know, like one way of putting it, like I think a lot of people think of it as like being left, like leaving people behind, but I like to say leaving them where they are, right? Maybe there are certain realizations that you had through this eclipse season that we just came out of that had you realize like where you want to grow and what would feel more nourishing for you in terms of like your life path, your direction, your personal growth, your emotional life, like what to go towards and what just no longer aligns with that. Like who can come on the boat and who can't, like who makes it to the boat to go with you to this new land, right? Like she's traversing these emotional waters and you can see the landscape in the background, right? Like the land that she's going to. So, you know, in a way it's like going to greener pastures, but it's like continuing on with your journey. And she looks like a little sullen or sad in this particular, you know, card because yes, sometimes that feels like there's like some grief, you know, even if it feels exciting to go in a new direction, you might feel like certain people can't match your pace of growth or, are not going to be along for this particular leg of the trip or maybe ever again at all. And so while that can feel exciting to go to a new place, it can also feel like maybe there's something to be honored about the grief of letting those people be where they are. And who knows, those people might catch up to your timeline and to where your growth path is at some other future point, right? But for right now, you're being encouraged to like, don't stop, keep going, like keep moving towards this new direction and allow yourself to like really get excited about this new level of growth that you're moving towards. I like this energy because again, like it very much like the picture even shows like coming out of this eclipse season, moving forward, right? With this energy of the new moon to the full moon is like moving forward, really building this energy. So I'm really liking this for you, Capricorn. I know that it might not feel like the most exciting, but in a way it can be. And it feels softer and I kind of really like this for you. I don't know why, but I just feel like I like this for you. So hopefully this feels like it really makes sense and it feels helpful. You know, I would say to get the overall full picture, go check out your May reading. I'll have that up here on the screen. So if this was insightful or helpful in any way, please consider giving it a like and following subscribing to my channel. It does help as I'm building this channel. For those of you who have subscribed recently, thank you so much. And thank you for your time and thank you for being here. I'll see you in the next video. Bye.